Doyara Sagara Dasa Kuruna Kori Oh hey Vaishnava Taku Doyara Sagara Dasa Kuruna Kori Diya Parachar Shoro He Amai Paranada Jaya Bhega Duni Jaya Dosha Shoji Jaya Dina Devo Dase Jaya Satsanga Deho He Amare Boshashi Sange Rashe Ekati Amar Nahi Pai Bhalo Hari Rama Sankirtane Tumi Kripa Kori Sharabindu Diya Deho Krishna Nama Dhane Krishna se tomar Krishna ji se paro Tomara shakti bhache Amito Kanga Krishna Krishna Boli Dadava Pache Mate Amito Kanga Krishna Krishna Boli Dadava Pache Mate Oh hey Vaishnava Thakur Loyara Sagara Dasa Kuruna Kori Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Vaishnava Thakur Vaishnava Thakur Jaya Vaishnava Thakur Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada. Ujjvala Varna Gaura Varade Shirasita Niravari Bhava Videva Ujjvala Varna Gaura Varade Shirasita Niravari Bhava Videva Gadgara Sara Baba Vikara Surjannatar Jananara Vishara Bhavaya Bhajana Karanam Karunam Sampranamamisha Shishka Chitanaya Arunam Bharatara Charu Kapula Hindu Devindita Nakta Chaya Ruchira Pitan Jaguna Nama Vinodam Sangana Mamita Shri Shakti Kanaya Shigalita Nayana Kala Jala Dharma Kushana Navarasa Baba Vikaram Vilasam Sampranamamisha Shri Shakti Kandayam Chanchara Charu Charna Bhakti Ruchira Manta Santa Padam Maduram Chandra Venindita Shitala Varanam Sampranamamisha Shri Shakti Kanayam Shakti Tora Kamandali Chandram Divyakale Varam Nitamundam Kalmasha Kandana Dandam Sampranamamisha Shri Shakti Kandaya Chanda Viraja Lakta Balita Kandita Dindara Vara Ruchira Malayajja Virachita Ujjvala Tilakam Sampranamamisha Shri Shakti Saraya Nindita Aruna Kamala Dalanayanam Ajanulam Vita Shri Vijayikara Kalevara Kaishora Mataka Vesham Sampranamamisha Shri Shakti Kanaya Ugrala Varena Vara Deva Vilasita Niravari Baba Deva Pavana Kupaya Lesha Vibhabari Shesha Loka Purvisha Mitrachari Uttajiva Bolo Hari Hari Mukunda Murari Rama Krishna Haya Jiva Shinga Vamana Shimanu Sudana Rajendra Nandana Shama Upana Gatana Vaitava Shatana Jaya Sharati Rama Yashoda Gulala Govinda Gopala Vrindavana Purandara Gopi Priya Jana Radhika Ramana Bhuvana Sundara Bhara Damana Kakara Makana Taskara Gopi Jana Mastahari Rajaya Kala Gopa Vrindapala Chittahari Vansidhari Yogindra Bandana Shirandanandana Prajajana Bhayahari Navina Nirada Rupa Manohara Mohara Vamshi Vihari Yashoda Nandana Sansari Shurana Vishudhara Savirati Satam Patanata Rasaparayata Vrindavidina Nivati Ananda Vardana Prema Nitena Purashara Jojatama Bhuvandanadana Chitta Vinorana Samasta Gunagana Dhamma Jamuna Jivana Keli Parayana Manasa Chandra Chatora Naturaya Jao Krishna Jata Rako Vatana Mananora Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Guru Sai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Sai Gaura Hari Bol Sai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Bhagavad Gita chapter 18, please. Moksha Yoga Namashtasno Dhyaya Junuvacha Sanyasyasya Mahabaho Tattvamicchami Veditum Yagyasya Krishikesha Pritakeshi Nishudhana Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sanyasam Karmanam Vidu Kagam Prahustyagam Vichakshanaha Tyajam Dosha Vadityeke Karma Prahurmanishinaha Yajnadana Tapakarma Natyajam Miti Chapare Nishayam shinu me tatra tyage bharata sattama tyago hi purusha vyagra trivida samprakirtita yajna dana tapa karma na tyajyam karma eva tat yajno danam tapaschaiva pavanani manishinam etanyapi tu karmani sangam tyakva palani cha kartavyani ti me partha nishchitam matam uttamam niyatasya tu sannyasa karma no papadyate mohatasya parityagas tamasa parikirtita dukam ityeva yat karma kaya klesha bayat tyajet satkritva rajasam tyagam naiva tyaga palam labe karyam ityeva yat karma niyatam kriyaterjuna sangam tyakva palam chaiva satyaga satviko mataha nadvesha kushalam karma kushalena nusajyate tyagi sattva samavishto nedhavi china samshaya nahi deha brata shakyam taktum karmanya sheshataha yastu karma palatyagi satyagitya badiyate anishtam ishtam mishram cha tridvidham karma napalam bhavat yat yaginam pretya natu sannyasinam kvachit panchaitani mahabaho karanani nibodhame Sankhe kritanti proktani siddhayye sarvakarmanam adhishtanam tata karta karanam cha pratagvidam vividascha pratak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam shariravan manobhiryat karma prarabhater nara Yayam va viparitam va panchaite tasya hetava taitraivam sati kartaram atmanam alam tuya pashyatya krita bhutitvan nasa pashyati durmatihi yassa naham krito bhavo Budhir yassa nalipyate atvapi sa imalokan nahanti na nibhadyate Yanam gyayam parigyata trividha karma chodana karanam karma karteti trividha karma sangraha Yanam karma chakarta cha Tridaiva guna bedata Rochite guna sankyane Yata vachchinutanyapi Sarva bhuteshu yenaikam Bhavam abhyayam ikshate Avibhaktam vibhakteshu Tadjnanam vitirhatvikam Pratatvenu tadajnanam Nana bhavam pratagvidan Eti sarveshu bhuteshu Tadjnanam vitirajasam Yatu Krishna vedekasmin Karye saktam ahaitukam Atat varta vadalpam sha Tattamasam udharitam Niyatam sangarahitam Araga dveshatakritam Apala prepsuna karma yatat sattvikam yatu kame sunakarma sahankaryena vapuna kriyate bahulayasam tadrajasam udaritam anubandam shayam himsam anapeksha chapaurusham mohad arabatye karma yatat tamasamuchyate mukta sango naham badi Trityutsaha samanvita Sidya sidyor nirvikara Karta sattvika uchate Ragi karma pala prepsur Lubdo hinsatmako shuchi Arsha shokanvita karta Rajasa parikirtita Ayukta prakrita stabda Shato naiskritiko lasa Vishadi dirga sutricha Karta tamasa uchate Budhir bedam drateshchaiva Gunatas trividam shrinu Rochamanam asheshena Vitakvenam dananjaya Pravritim cha nivritim cha Karya karye bhaya bhaye Bandam moksham jaya veti Buddhi sapartha sattviki Yaya dharmam adharmam cha Karyam cha karyameva cha Ayatavat prajanati Buddhi sapartha rajasi Adharmam dharmam itiya Manyate tamasavrata Sarvartam viparitamscha Buddhi sapartha tamasi Dritya yaya dharayate Mana pranendriya kriya Yogena vyabhicharinya Driti sapartha sattviki Yatu dharma kamartan Tritya dharyaterjuna Prasangena palakangshi Diti sapartha rajasi Yaya swapnim bayam shokam Vishadam madameva cha Navimuchati durmeda Triti sapartha tamasi Sukham tvidinam trividham Shinu me bharatarshapha Abhyasadramate yatra Dukhantam cha nigacchati Yattadagre vishamiva Pariname mritopamam Tatsukam sattvikam proktam Atma buddhi prasadajam Vishayendriya samyogad Yattadagre mritopamam Pariname vishamiva Tatsukam rajatam smitam Yadagre chanubande cha Sukham mohanamatmanaha Nidralasya pramadotam Tatamasam udaritam Natat asti prativyam va Divi deveshu va punaha Sattvam prakriti jar muktam Yad ebhi syatribhir gunai Ramana kshatriya visham Shudranam chaparantapa Karmani pravibhaktani Sabhava pravavairgunai Shamo dhamas tapashaucham Shantir arjavameva cha Jnanam vijnanam astikyam Rama karma sabhavajam Shauryam tejo dhritir daksham Yudhe chapyapalayanam Dhanam ishvara bhavascha Shatra karma sabhavajam Krishigo rakshavani jam Vaishya karma sabhavajam Paricharyatmakam karma Shrujasyapi Svabhavajam Swe Swe Karmanya Birata Samsiddhim Labhater Nara Sakarma Nirata Siddhim Yata Vindati Tachrinu Yata Pravritir Bhutanam Yena Sarva Midam Tatam Sakarmana Tamabhyarcha Siddhim Vindati Manava Shreyan Sadharmo Vigunaha Paradharma Swanushtitat Svabhavaniyatam Karma Kurvanapnoti Kilbisham Sahajam Karma Kaunteya Sadoshamapi Natyajet Sarvaramba Hidoshena Turmanagnir Ivavrataha Asakta Buddhi Sarvatra Chitatma Vigatasbriha Naishkarmya Siddhim Paramam Sanyasenadi Gacchati Siddham Prapto Yata Brahma Yatapnoti Nibodhame Samasenaiva Kaunteya Nishta Jnanasya Yapara Budya Vishuddhaya Yukto Krityatmanam Niyamya Cha Shabdadin Vishayam Tyaktva Raga Dvesha Vyudasya Cha Vivikta Sevi Lagvashi Yata Vakaya Manasa Jnana Yoga Paro Nityam Vairagyam Samupashrita Ahankaram Balam Darpam Kamam Krodham Parigraham Vimucha Nirmama Shanto Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma Nashochati Nakangshati Samak Sarveshu Bhuteshu Madbhaktim Labhate Param Bhaktya Mam Abhijanati Yavanyaschasmi Tatvataha Tato Mam Tatvato Gyadva Vishyate Tadanantaram Sarva Karmanyapi Sada Kurvano Madhyapashraya Mat Prasada Rabapnoti Shashvatam Paramavyayam Cetasa Sarva Karmani Mai Sanyasya Matparaha Buddhi Yoga Mupashritya Matchita Satatam Bhava Matchita Sarva Durgani Maprasadat Tarishyasi Atachetvam Ahankaran Nashosyasi Vinangshyasi Yadahankaram Ashritya Nayotsya iti manyase Mityaisha Vyavasayaste Prakritistvam Niyokshati Sabhavajena Kaunteya Nibhadasvena Karmana Kartunishyasi Anmohat Karishyasya Vishopitat Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Riddesher Junatishtati Ramayan Sarva Bhutani Yantrarudhani Mayaya Tameva Sharanam Gacha Sarva Bhavena Bharata Taprasadat Param Shantim Sanam Prapsyasi Shashvatam Iti te Jnanamakhyatam Guyad Guyattaram Maya Vimrishai Tad Asheshena Yatechasi Tatakuru Sarva Guyattamam Bhuya Shinu me varmambacha Ishtosi me dridham iti Tato vakshami te hitam Manmana bhava madbhakto Madhyaji mam namaskuru Mami vashyasi satyam te Pratijane priyosi me Sarva dharman parityaja Mamekam shararam braja, aham tam sarva papebhyo, mokshayishami ma shuchaha. Idam te natapaskaya, na bhaktaya kadachana, na chashushusha vacham, na chamam yobhyasuyati. Ya idam paramam kuyam, magbhakteshva vidhasyati, bhaktim mai param kritva, mami vaisyasya samshayaha. Nacha tasman manusheshu, kashin me priyakritamam, bhavita nacha me tasmad, anya pirataro bhuvi. Adveshyate cha ya imam, dharmyam sambharam avyayo, jnana yagnena tenaham, ishtasyam iti me mati. Shradhavananashuyasya, shrunuyarapiyo nara, sopi mukta shubha lokan, prapnuyat punya karmanam. Kachit etat shrutam partha, tvayaikagrena chetasa, kachit agyana sammoha, pranashtaste dhananjaya. Arjuna uvacha, nashto moha smitir labdha, tvat prasadan mayachuta, stitosmi gata sandeha, karishe vachanam tava. Sanjaya uvacha, ityaham vasudevasya, partasya cha mahatmanaha, sambadam imam ashrosham, adbhutam romaharshanam. Vyasa prasadat shrutavan, etad guyam aham param, yogam yogeshwarat krishnat, sakshat katayata swayam. Rajan samsmrita samsmritya, sambadam idam adbhutam, keshavarjuna yo punyam, rishyami cha muhurmahu. Tacha samsmrita samsmritya, rupam atyadbhutam hare, vismayo me mahan rajan, rishyami cha punah punaha. Yatra Yogeshvara Krishno, Yatra Partho Dhanurdhara, Tatra Shrir Vijayo Bhutir, Dhruva Nitir Matir Mama. Om Tat Sat Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Supanishatsu, Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre, Shri Krishna Arjuna Sambhade, Moksha Yogo Nama Ashtadashodhyayaha. Hari Om Tat Sat. Srimad Bhagavatam class. Partivadharano dumas tasmadagnis jarimayaha tamasasturatas tasmad sattvam yad brahmadarshanam bejare nayotagre. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jannabala Jaya Giri Varadari Jaya Gopi Jannamala Jaya Giri Varadari Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Vraja Jannaranjana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Girivardhari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. Anugrahaya Manusham Dehamastita Vajate Tadrishi Krida Yashutra Parobhave. We're on Canto 11, Chapter 3, Liberation from the Illusory Energy, and it's text number 31. The verse is as follows: Smaranta smarayantascha mito gauga haram harim bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya vibrat yutpulakam tanu. And I'll say the words and the meanings, please repeat. Smaranta, remembering. Smarayanta, cha, and reminding. Mita, one another. Aga oga haram, one who takes away everything inauspicious from the devotee. Harim, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhaktya, by devotion. Sanjataya, awakened. Bhaktya, by devotion. Viprati, possesses. Utpulakam, agitated by ecstasy. Tanum, body. The devotees of the Lord constantly discuss the glories of the personality of Godhead among themselves. Thus, they constantly remember the Lord and remind one another of his qualities and pastimes. In this way, by their devotion to the principles of Bhakti Yoga, the devotees please the personality of Godhead who takes away from them everything inauspicious. Being purified of all impediments, the devotees awaken to pure love of Godhead. And thus, even within this world, their spiritualized bodies exhibit symptoms of transcendental ecstasy, such as standing of the bodily hairs on end. The word Aghauga haram is very significant in this verse. Agha refers to that which is inauspicious or sinful. The living entity is actually Sakchit Ananda Vigraha, or eternal and full of bliss and knowledge. But by neglecting his eternal relationship with Krishna, the personality of Godhead, he commits sinful activities and undergoes the inauspicious result in the form of material suffering. The chain of sinful reactions is called Oga, or a relentless wave of suffering. Krishna is Aghauga harim. He takes away the sinful reactions of his devotees, who are thus entitled to experience the inconceivable bliss of the kingdom of God, even while remaining in this world. The words bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya indicate that there are two divisions of Bhakti Yoga, Sadhana Bhakti and Raga Anuga Bhakti. Srila Prabhupada has elaborately explained in his book, The Nectar of Devotion, the progress of the devotee from Sadhana Bhakti, or the execution of regulated principles, to Raga Anuga Bhakti, or service executed in love of Godhead. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, a liberated soul is always enthusiastic due to the appearance of transcendental ecstasy within his body. Thus, he always aspires to remain overwhelmed in chanting the glories of the personality of Godhead Hari. Namasheshtam manamapi sachiputram atrasarupam Shri Rupam tasyakarajam urupari maturim goshtavatim Radha kundam girivadam ho radhika matavasham To yasya pratita kripaya Vikurum tam natosmi Matsamo nasti papatma Naparadi chakaschana Parihare pilajame Kim ruve prashottama Yavatinam yata yuni Yunam cha yuvatal yata Mano biramate tadvan Mano me ramatam tvai Bhumau skalita paranam Bhumir eva valambanam Tvai jata paranam Tvameva sharanam prabho Govinda bhavabe radhe prate tomaham sada Tvariyami tijanatu Govindo mam tvaya saha Radhe vrindavanadi shekaranamrita vahani Kripaya nijapadabja dasamaya pratyatam Antaya madra balahari dasavayo yad Rama Krishna charanash parasha pramodaha Manam tanoti sahago ganayostayo yad Paniya suya vasakanda kanda bulai Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today we're celebrating the appearance day of Lord Ramachandra, and Lord Ramachandra's name and the Lord himself are non-different. And he's also one of the forms of the Lord in Maryada, which means he's worshipped by those in a state of reverence. He follows rules and regulations very strictly, to say the least. So much so that it's a painful pastime to hear how Ramachandra is so beholden to his father's word that he goes off into the forest. And at the end of the pastime, because of his kingly duties and his concern for his dharma as a king, and the criticism of the citizens of the way in which he brought Sita back into his palace and so forth, although there was absolutely no fault, and obviously she's transcendental to any so-called transgression, and even as it was proven by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he found a leaf in the Kurma Purana which described how when Ravana stole away Sita, he got the wrong one, because by Krishna's potencies, he stole away only Maya Sita, and the real Sita was hidden away, protected by Agni, who later manifested when Sita was tested to see what her purity was. She reemerged from the fire as in her original form. Nonetheless, Ramachandra, in his mood of Maryada, had done his duty to maintain this sense of absolute adherence to rules and regulations and to morality, as was the culture at the time. So his appearance in this world also is yet another way in which he appears to attract the attention of the souls of the world. And therefore, we have something to remember. Smaranta smarayantascha, which is the beginning of this verse today. There's a way in which we remember Krishna. This is important because, remember, we're putting back together again those impressions that we've taken in from the world, recombining them and so forth. And when we leave this world, Krishna says that antakale smaran meva smaran mukva kalevaram ya prayati samadbhavam yati nashyata samshaya. There's no doubt, he says, about this principle, this important principle about remembering him. There's no doubt, he says, that if you remember me, very specifically, people are conveniently vague about God. If you talk about God, Prabhupada mentioned this in regards to Rabindranath Tagore, who is a great poet and supposedly very religious and so forth, but Prabhupada mentioned how in all his poetry he refers to the Supreme as Tumi, and he doesn't give any name or specifics. He avoids that. There are others like, I won't mention names, it's not polite, because somebody might be offended. But there are other kinds of so-called philosophers, that is pretty condescending to say so-called, but fact's a fact, who became nondescript when it came to God, as we call it, conveniently vague, because it's inconvenient to mention the particulars of the Supreme. Because once you do, then you have to admit there is a Supreme that's a person, and I'm not him. Otherwise, we can still hold out hope that either by economic development, I'll become king-like or God-like, or philosophically, there is possibly a way in which I just forgot and I can remanifest my godly power in the world and so forth. But in the remembrance of Ramachandra, there's no inconvenience. The soul's really inconvenienced by forgetting Krishna. That's when all the inconvenience begins. Once we forget Krishna and strike out on our own independently, as the Bhagavatam describes, the merchant or just the fortune seeker who goes off on his own away from the service of the Lord, enters the forest of material enjoyment and becomes lost, and then harassed by crickets who keep him awake all night, and by various types of animals, owls peering at him through the trees, and he starves sometimes, and he's greatly aggrieved and lost in this world. So smarantascha, when the Lord appears, anugrahaya bhaktanam manusham dehamashrita ashrita. There's a way in which he gives us something to think about, something specific. We need that in our minds. When we see the deity, the mind has something to hold on to. The eyes can see the form and beauty of the Lord and the very particular aspects of him that are unknown in this world until he appears and until his pure devotees put him forward. This is the preoccupation of pure devotees in the world, smarayantash, to remind other people. Like Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira performed the Rajasuya Yajna because, well, let me say something about the Rajasuya Yajna. It was a grand ceremony, including Vedic sacrifices where you'd offer tons of grains and ghee into a fire to offer to the Supreme and so forth. And it was to establish the most powerful king on the planet. And to do that, one had to get this submission of all other kings everywhere. They'd all have to agree. Part of the agreement was they'd have to pay a tax too, to help pay for the yajna. You really have to be submissive. Not only do you have to agree to it, like you got to pay for this. And when Yudhishthira set out to perform this Rajasuya Yagya, he consulted with Krishna. And the main idea of Yudhishthira was, at the Rajasuya Yagya, there's a presentation of, or an honoring of the most exalted person there. Although the king's being elevated, there's a part of the ceremony in which everyone would acknowledge who is the greatest of all personalities. And Yudhishthira was looking forward to that part. That's the part he wanted to come out, that Krishna would be put forward as the best of all at the yagya, and he was. Samba had brought him up and presented him as the best. There were people there who were envious of Krishna, who were very disturbed when he brought this up, especially Shishupal. It's like, what are you talking about? Who is this guy, Krishna? We don't know him. We don't know what caste he is, and so forth. So the impetus for Yudhishthira to go to all this trouble of sending out his brothers to various kingdoms to get submission and agreement for Yudhishthira to be established through the Rajasuya Yagya, it was all meant to glorify Krishna. And also, Krishna wanted it done because Yudhishthira was a devotee and he wanted him to be on the throne. And this is the only prerogative of the devotee, is to put forward Krishna in the world, and it's Krishna's only prerogative is to put forward his devotee in the world, because when Krishna is in the center, then everyone's happy. And this is the main principle of life. So smaranta smarayantascha. And then mito gauga haram harim means if people are able to be in a community and a family and a society where they can remember Krishna or Lord Ramachandra, then their sinful reactions become vanquished. Because just by remembering Krishna, who's all pure, he takes away the sins. It's mentioned also in the 11th canto, Vikriditam, no, that's not it. That's 10th canto. I'm thinking of Vrishrijati Hridayam Nayasya Sakshad Darim Abhihito Pyagoganasha. Again, Pyagoganasha, that idea of ongoing sinful reactions become vanquished because of speaking Krishna's name or speaking about him. And what's more, when one goes on with this, bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya, what's indicated in this verse, there's two kinds of bhakti. The first kind is sadhana bhakti, or regulated bhakti, before one has a taste or a ruchi. It's called a jata ruchi. Before your ruchi is born, you practice devotional service. In the same way that those who are spontaneously worshiping Krishna, you would perform devotional activities, like this morning we were worshiping Tulsi Devi, and this is a very esoteric practice, praying to be a follower of the damsels of Vraja and so forth. But one may not have full realization or taste. Nonetheless, this is our practice. So there's bhaktya sanjayate bhaktya, and then there's a development into spontaneous devotional service that arises from the practice of devotional service. So the devotees who do remember Krishna and who practice devotional service, even if it's not completely spontaneous, then bhibrat utpulakam tanun. Tanu means the body, and utpulakam means that there's symptoms of ecstasy within the body. And those persons who practice devotional service, they begin to feel ecstatic symptoms. Krishna bolbe jabe pulak habe jorbe anki bolitai. Bhaktivinoda Thakur confirms in his song that as one goes on chanting Hare Krishna, then gradually these symptoms of ecstasy, tears will come to the eyes and hairs stand on end by the practice. So remembering Ramachandra, the devotees feel satisfaction because, for one thing, everybody wants this remembrance or to know somebody or think of somebody who's perfect. And the question is, where do you find such a person? There are so many politicians and musicians and actors and famous people who put themselves forward, or others put them forward, and everyone hopes against hope that maybe this is the one that is all perfect. But then we find years later that there was some fault, minor or major, or they lose the quality that everyone was attracted to. For instance, it's well known that in this world, people who are beautiful later on lose their beauty. I mean, by worldly standards, the beauty that everyone's looking for, the youthfulness and the way their hair looks, full head of hair and sort of a glow, and the body's very firm, all these things that people look for and say, wait, what? Look. But that passes very quickly in this world. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may, a famous poem by Robert Herrick that describes that, this is better get it now because it's not going to last. These things, the rose comes up and then it's like 2 days later. In Japan during this time of year, it's cherry blossom season. That is one country that is landscaped from one side to the next. Every part of Japan is awash in flowers at this time of year. That's why so many people go there. That's not why we're going. And but they have this way of, in their Shinto culture and Buddhist culture, of appreciating transitory beauty. It could be there one day in full blown, it's called Munkai, where all the blossoms are fully blown out and it's just indescribable beauty, but then the next day they're just gone. The wind blows them or rain comes and they start to wither, and everybody does in this world one way or another. And also, most people are hiding something. They have some quality that they don't want to show, and then later on it comes out. So where can you find somebody who's completely moral, that's completely truthful all the time? Well, Ramachandra. It satisfies the need for that. We want, is there a politician who's completely truthful? I remember growing up as a kid, my parents would be into one politician or another, and then there was this sense this person's going to save the world. There was John F. Kennedy and Camelot, and this whole idea of he's young and he's like this, that, and the other thing. And then everyone, later on, not so much. And, ended in a ghastly way. So when we hear about Ramachandra, who's perfectly moral and completely honest, and his beauty is such that when the Munichari, the Rishicharis, they were in the forest of Dandakaranya, and they saw Ramachandra, they became so attracted to his beauty that they were meditating on thinking we'd like to, marry him or have some relationship with him. This is at a soul level. And Ramachandra didn't say anything, but he consented silently, and later on those Rishicharis took their birth in Lord Krishna's Leela as gopis. So he fulfills desire, he reciprocates with those who see him in a particular way and are attracted to his beauty one way or another. And he doesn't miss anything. He utters this famous verse, Sakradeva prapano yas tava asmi yadachate. Abhayam sarvadatasmai dadam ye tat ritam mama. He gives this vow that if anybody comes to me and surrenders and says that I take shelter of you, then he said, from that day on, I award that person fearlessness. And that's my vow forever. So who else can do that besides Lord Ramachandra, who's Krishna? So when Ramachandra appears in the world, it's a great cause for celebration. He grew up in Ayodhya. His father Dasarath couldn't have children, but then he was given a benediction by a great sage that he could have children. And then the Lord, who expands himself in the various forms in the Chaturvyuha, appeared as Ram, Lakshman, Shatrughna, and Bharat. And these four forms who are all Vishnu Tattva. And Ram being the chief. Lakshman, of course, we know from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in the Leela of Krishna is Balaram. So these are his potencies. Parasha Shakti Vivadaiva Shuyate is unlimited potencies, personal potencies in which he appears. And growing up, the citizens of Ayodhya, who felt greatly protected by Dasarath, who was a great king, saw that he would be succeeded by these beautiful princes. Especially Ram became the darling of everyone there, and they all watched him. You can imagine in a place where there's a perfect king, and then you see that now there's going to be succession that'll work out. And they were very excited for Ram to take the throne. But then there was a twist. There was a lot of twists in the Ramayana, twists of fate. Because when they were grown in adolescence, that is the young sons of Dasarath who had been trained as Kshatriyas, and they could be seen walking through the streets of Ayodhya with their weapons on their shoulders, getting military training. They're so beautiful in bodily form, and everyone could understand that now we're going to have a new ruler, and Dasarath had indicated this. So everyone was celebrating, and the night before, there was an incident. And that was that the mother of Bharat, Kaikeyi, who considered Ram to be just like her own son, was happily moving about her palace singing, and she had bad association with her maidservant, whose name was Mantra. Mantra had caught on that Ram would be installed on the throne, and that Kaikeyi was happy about it. But Mantra was self-interested, because she had this idea that if Ram took the throne, then maybe Kaikeyi wouldn't be the main queen. She wouldn't have as much wealth. She might even be pushed out of her position. And as usual for a materialistic person, Mantra was thinking, what's going to happen to me? What's in it for me? It was just like when Bali Maharaj wanted to give away his wealth to Vamandev, then Shukracharya was thinking, what about my dakshina? If you give all that away, he didn't say it directly, but he said, how are you going to pay me? So this was the self-interested nature of Mantra, and this is the bane of this world, is this self-interest. So she spoke to Kaikeyi in very devious undertones, gradually diminishing Kaikeyi's enthusiasm for Ram being installed on the throne. And this is something to keep in mind, that whatever enthusiasm we have and the kind of direction we have in life, especially in our spiritual life, can easily be diminished by being around offensive or envious people. A few words here and there. In fact, you might notice that there might be somebody you revere very much in devotional service, but then if you hear somebody who's envious of them write something or say something, then you might become doubtful, or now you hold back a little bit. that wholehearted appreciation of that person starts to diminish because of hearing envious words of somebody. So this was the case with Kaikeyi, and then she started thinking in a self-interested way, yeah, what will happen to me, and so forth. So then, of course, she took the advice of Mantra and came up with this plan, which is practically unthinkable nowadays because people don't follow vows very well, nor do they keep their promises. They say, yeah, I'll do it, and then later on saying, no, I forgot. That's one thing people say all the time when they go in front of the court and say, I just don't remember. It's like, well, what are you going to do with that person now? It's like, I don't remember if I did it or not. They either avoid the truth, or they outright lie, or they don't keep their promise, and so forth. But that wasn't the case in this pastime with Ramachandra and Dasarath, his father, because Dasarath had given a promise to Kaikeyi years and years before when she had saved him on the battlefield. And he gave her 3 boons. And she said, I'll take it later. So somehow Mantra knew about these and said, you've got these 3 boons, now's the time to use them. So you tell Dasarath that you want them now, and he'll have to pay you back. So one of them is that Ram not be installed on the throne. Number 2, Bharat be installed instead. And number 3, Ram's banished to the forest. Pretty severe. So Kaikeyi used her ultimate weapon as a woman, the wife of the king, and she had a special room called the sulking room. If you get a new house, make sure you get one of those. And so she went to the sulking room, and when Dasarath came home, jubilant because everyone's in a festive mood, and Ram would be installed the next day on the throne. He looked for his wife. Where is she? Where is he? And the other servants said, oh, she's in the sulking room. Why? And when he came there, he found that she had collapsed on the floor. She had taken off all her jewelry, and she put on some very common cloth and had just fallen into a heap on the floor, disconsolate. And of course, as a good husband, Dasarath tried to console her in various ways, and it was a trap. Because as he extended himself more and more, then she finally began to respond, and she said, do you promise that you'll fulfill my needs right now? And he said, of course. Why wouldn't I fulfill your needs? Whatever it is to bring you out of this mood, I'll give you. You swear on it. Swear on Ramachandra that you'll do this. And of course she knew Ramachandra was his life and soul. So yes, of course, I swear it. I swear it 1,000 times. So then she uttered those words that I want the boons back, and these are the 3 boons. And then Dasarath was disconsolate. He fainted. He couldn't stay conscious and think of the conundrum he was in, that he would have to tell the citizens that he was banishing his beloved son. What to speak of till Ram? So when Ram came, Dasarath couldn't even utter the words. And Kaikeyi dragged it out of him and spoke it to him. And Ram said, well, why doesn't my father say it? And he finally acquiesced and said that it was true, these were the 3 conditions. And Ram, yes, Father, right away. This is unusual because most people look forward to their ascent to power. They try to keep the power at that time. But Ramachandra was completely dutiful to his father's words, Arya Vachasa, the words of the superior. So there's a lot to be said about the Arya Vachasa. Maybe we'll talk about it later. But of course, Ramachandra going to the forest is a great scene, pathos, where the feelings of all the citizens of Ayodhya come out. You know, they're in a town, and it's all based on Ramachandra's love for Ramachandra. He's the cynosure of everyone. And when they left Ayodhya, Ram's chariot driver was going slow because the people were all trying to walk along with him. They didn't want to leave him. They wanted to go into the forest with him. And Ramachandra said, speed up, speed up, speed up. And the people would walk faster. Finally, when they got to the outskirts of town, right on the cusp of entering the forest and the wilderness, all the townspeople camped out. And Ramachandra, along with Bharat, who had come, Lakshman and Sita, who had come along with him. Ramachandra, and by the way, Lakshman was so faithful, his younger brother, and as the servant of Ram, that during this whole exile, he didn't sleep, because he was awake in the daytime doing service for Sita and Ram, and at night he stayed awake to protect them. Such dedication that he had. And Ramachandra woke up and said, we have to leave now because the citizens will continue to follow us. And he had to cross the river. There was a great friend of Dasarath there named Guha who had greeted them there at the forest. And there's a pastime that's very touching of Ram crossing the river and going into the wilderness. The boatman's name is Kevat. This boatman had taken Ram across the river to enter into the wilderness, and Sita Devi wanted to pay him something, so she took off a ring. And he said, no, I can't accept that, because it's a custom in the Vedic culture that if you're in the same profession, then you don't pay for your service when you go to the other person. Like if you cut hair, you go to the barber. You're a barber, they're a barber. You just like cut for free, you know. So he said, no, she said, why won't you accept some payment? He said, we're in the same profession. I can't accept this from Ram. And Ram said, well, how are we in the same profession? You're a boatman, I'm a prince in exile. And he said, I've taken you across this river in my boat, and I only ask that you do the same thing for me. The boat of your lotus feet, you take me across the material ocean when the time comes. Same profession. So although in the great separation and the severe circumstances, the sweetness of Ram's pastimes comes out as he meets various devotees in the forest. And all of the pastimes that Ram has have these lessons. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead acting as a prince, and at the same time he's exiled into the forest and he meets common people, even bears and monkeys and so forth, and befriends them. They fight against Ravan. And throughout the pastimes, we find the various human-like emotions that Ramachandra exhibits in separation from Sita, the way that he attends to Jatayu after Jatayu fights for him, even though it's a lost cause to fight against Ravana, he does so anyway, the way he admonishes Hanuman and others for belittling the small creatures who are trying to help build a bridge, the way he kills Vali, and then Bali becomes indignant and starts to criticize him and says, how could you have killed me, in a non-Kshatriya-like way. And then Ramachandra brings out all of Vali's faults, how he has transgressed Dharma, and how Ramachandra actually has helped him by killing him. He said, now you'll ascend to a higher level. So all these mixed together actually catches the mind and heart of those who hear the Ramayana and find somebody completely moral. It's from thousands of years ago, from Treta Yuga. So there are billions and trillions of people who have been born and are no more. They've merged, their life air is merged with the totality of air, and their body's gone. And nobody knows who they are. But everybody remembers Ram. And when everybody, like in Thailand, all the bridges there are the Rama 1, Rama 2, Rama 3. And in Indonesia, people, they play the gamelan and they remember the pastimes of Lord Ram in all their music. And of course in India, forget about it. You put on the Ramayana and the whole country shuts down. That was the case some years ago. The Ramayana would come on television. It's like, how come nobody's at work today? How come there's no traffic? Because everyone's watching Ramachandra. So some say, well, where is this God, and who is he? It's like, whoever he is, he's shutting down the city right now. You're not. Nobody cares where you are. But everyone cares about Ram. That's, that lasting impression. So we have smarantas smarayantascha. As we remember his pastimes, anugrahaya bhaktanam manusham dehamashrita, that he comes in a human-like form, but he's so charming. His beauty is legendary. The way he deals with everybody is so exemplary and touching that this becomes our ideal. And yashutva tatparovavet. And just by hearing about him again and again and again and again, then we become revived. I was watching a video we had from when we were reading the Ramayana a few years ago, and I'm thinking about how, we hear all these things and then we move on with our lives. But then when I went back and reheard it, because it's an interesting phenomenon to have the video, it's like, yeah, we were there. In fact, I was reading the book. And then I was remembering what we read and what it felt like to be there and who was there in the room. In fact, this morning on the way here, I was missing Gandharvika Radha Mataji a lot, because she's always such a presence at every program, listening so carefully and things. And just thinking, we've heard these things, we've been there, and they're all in there somewhere. We may not remember them right now, but Krishna says, ante kale smaraneva, smaran mukva kalevaram, ya priyati tajandeham, yati nashyatra. Without a doubt, they'll all come back to you. Like basically saying, if you dedicate your life to this, if you surrender even once, sakradeva prapanoyas, tabas, tadad asmi tadyachate. Sorry, I blew it. But he says, if even one time, sakradeva, just one time you say like, okay, I get it, you're God, I take shelter. That's enough. Even like a little trace of that. And all the things, all the hearing, yashrutva tatparovavet, it all goes in and it transforms us. It's our wealth. It's what we have. So these days of appearance of the Lord and Ramachandra's appearance day, the dedication to coming down here from Mangalartik that you all did, sitting, listening, chanting Ram, 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 Ram. How many times did you say Ram this morning? You need a AI to count it all up. So many Rams went out today. That's all there. It's never forgotten. Krishna's perfect. Ram's perfect. He remembers everything and he accounts for everything. And it doesn't take much. You don't have to push the doorbell more than once. So let's just take a couple of reflections because the class is over. This is extra.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for bringing this in the beginning one that you were bringing about how the Kekai turned the event, and I was just thinking that it's so correlatable in our daily life. Sometimes we are planning for like a very big event, and like if you just take ourselves in that, like everything is festive environment, and then next day is Ram going to Cornet, and then the whole fortune of turn event happened that he is going to the forest. And so if we just put ourselves is like such a reversal of thing, but how Lord Ram took it graciously. He didn't like. Similarly, I found that in our, at least in my life, I could find that the reversal of event happened, that we are anticipating some very big program or very big thing or big event something, and then suddenly that we are not able to do. And there are ways to become frustrated, there are ways to become angry, there are ways to, but other thing is that graciously accept and move forward. So I was just recollecting that how the whole incidents happen, and it can be so relatable in our life. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so relatable. Thanks, Mukarvin, for reminding us, because it's very practical. Follow what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, and then he sets the example. Radha Kripa Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, we were requesting that if we could continue that the mood as we started describing Rama's pastimes. I wish we could have a series of sessions on that one, because it was so engrossed. I was wish we could have never ended. So just
that killing of Vali really was Vali was, and then his son is Angada, right? So, and Sugriv. There's a lot of twists and turns in that section of the Ramayana, because the two brothers and how they became at odds with one another, Vali and Sugriv. And even when Ram, he made a pact with Sugriv to kill Vali, and then Sugriv promised that he'd help. And then at that point, Sugriv had agitated Vali, which wasn't that hard to do, because he was a hothead, and they had a fight, and Ramachandra was poised to kill him, but he couldn't tell the difference between the two of them. So Sugriv almost got beat to an inch within his life, an inch of his life, and then he was wondering what Ramachandra was doing. He said, I thought you were going to kill him, and I almost got killed by my brother. He's very powerful. And Ram said, I couldn't tell the difference. You're going to have to wear something so that I can tell the difference between the two of you. And Vali went home to his wife, and when Sugriv came back soon after being beaten so badly, his wife said, something's wrong. See, the wives are powerful like that. But Vali, because of his pride and because the anger had overtaken him, he couldn't listen to that good advice. Because why would he have come back, she said, if you just almost beat him up? Why is he coming back and calling you out again? Something's wrong with this. Don't do it. But Vali went out again anyway, because he couldn't resist. So they fought again, and just as Vali was rising up to strike Sugriv, probably a fatal blow, Ramachandra from behind a tree shot him. And as his life was expiring, he was berating Ram, saying, how could you be such a coward to shoot me from behind the tree? I alluded to this earlier, but Ramachandra recounted all the immoral ways that Vali had conducted himself and illegally taken over the position there. And Ramachandra said that actually I've benefited you by killing you now. You'll be freed from all these sinful reactions, and you'll be able to attain a higher position in your next life. But we find, as the pastimes unfold, these alliances that he makes, even after that, Sugriv forgot his promise and started drinking again. Fell off the wagon. And then Lakshman got really angry because Sugriv promised, I'll get an army, we'll go out and we'll find Sita and everything. And, a month went by and it's like, well, maybe he just needs a little rest after all that fighting. And so another month. And finally, Lakshman became so angry that he went there and called him out, that he would kill him if he didn't fulfill his promise. And he finally, in earnest, started to look. Yes?
I was just thinking that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he has such wonderful relationship with the gopis, gopas, so much fun he has in Goloka Vrindavan. But then just for the sake of attracting devotees, he comes as Maryada Purushottam, where he has to be banished, he's in the forest, he's taking all that difficulty just to, attract living entities. So that kind of things, that how much Krishna wants us back, then, so living entities are so engrossed in the world. Just not Ramachandra, but, all the other incarnations also. He works so hard coming in different forms to attract us. I was just remembering.
Yeah, that's a nice summary of that verse that we keep reciting. Anugrahaya bhaktanam manusham deham ashrita bhajate tadashi krida yashutva tat parobhavet. That this is his mercy that he comes in this way, because then yashutva tat parobhavet, you can become the best devotee by hearing about these things. And we have evidence of this in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. When Mahaprabhu was walking in South India by himself from place to place, he had one servant. He came to the house of a Brahmin named Ramdas Vipra. And this Brahmin invited Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to his home to feed him and a place for him to stay as he's traveling. I don't know if you've ever been to somebody's house and they didn't feed you. That happened to me once. I was starving. I was so hungry, and you can't really say, can we stop talking and start eating? But, I'd been flying, and I got there, and it was getting later and later in the morning. I was like, I've never been this hungry in my life, and they were going on and on and on. Of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was there, and Ramdas Vipra was not cooking. And Mahaprabhu inquired from him, and Ramdas Vipra said, I'm too distraught. This Sita's been kidnapped by this demon Ravana. How could we even think of eating at a time like this? And Mahaprabhu was like, oh, I see. This is Yashutva Tat Parobhavet. He had heard about Ram. This is thousands of years later. And he entered into that mood of the Ramayana. And this is Bhaktya Sanjataya Bhaktya. There's hearing, this regulated hearing, and then one gradually enters into the pastimes, so much so that Mahaprabhu really appreciated his mood there. And later on, actually he appeased him. He told him what I said earlier about how it wasn't the real Sita that was kidnapped, he told him, but it was the other Sita. Have you ever told somebody something and it's like, where's the verse? Where's the verse? Like, I told him, but I didn't give him the pramanam. So Mahaprabhu felt like that, because later on when he was traveling and he found an ancient script from the Kurma Purana, and then it had that exact section in, he tore it out and he took it back to show him, say, see? Because he appreciated his mood of devotional service so much, and he wanted to substantiate it from Shastra. And there was no Veda base at that time. Just the original thing. Yes.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. The part where you mentioned that Kaikeyi was initially very happy that Lord Rama was going to be coronated as a king. But then Manthara came and just sudden turn of events. Some time ago, I was listening to Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, and he was commenting on this section. He said that if only Kaikeyi had some good counsel, because she was not a bad person, but just because of the effect of Manthara, she forgot all the good things. So he was mentioning how in our life we should always have some good counsel around us. So even if there is some ill effects, somebody would come and correct us and say, hey, what are you doing? This is not right. So I was just remembering that.
Yeah, you have to be preemptive about that, because you can just assume that there will be negativity and there will be reversals and something's going to come out. So you have to have somebody or more than one person that you can depend on to process it. So, yes, last one.
In the purport we read, we heard that a liberated soul is always enthusiastic, and that makes me think of Hanuman. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about the enthusiasm of Hanuman to serve Ramachandra and what we can learn from that.
Well, there's a story in the Brihat Bhagavatamrita, and excuse me if I don't remember all the exact details, if you want to fill them in as I go, but the general story that I remember is that the Lord had asked for Hanuman to appear, and a messenger had gone to, from the Lord had gone to tell him that Lord Krishna was asking him to come, and Hanuman was slightly nonchalant. But then when he told him it was Ramachandra, then before the messenger would get back, Hanuman had already leapt there and was standing ready to do service. I'll research and bring out the exact details, because it's much nicer than that. But it's something that Sanatana Goswami put in the Brihat Bhagavatamrita to explain the mood of Hanuman, of how he's so fully absorbed in the mood of service that he's always ready. This is the example he sets, that when any service is available, he immediately takes it. He had, as a little baby monkey, baby monkeys are kind of cute. Of course, when he was a little baby monkey, he was chasing after the sun, thinking it to be an orange or something. And he had these mystic powers that monkeys can be quite destructive, actually. They don't know their own strength, or they do, and then they utilize it. But he was cursed, or benedicted as it is, that he would forget his powers. And of course, when he remembered them later, he was reminded, I think, by Jatayu? Oh, Jambavan, who was there and said, actually, you're more powerful than you think. And then that was just enough what he needed to remember, and then leaped to Lanka. That's important too with association, because we can forget that we have the impetus to serve, and along with that, we also have the power to do it. So much to be said about Hanuman. We can maybe talk about him later too. But everyone has to go, because there's duties to do, right? We're not staying all day. And we'll be back here at 5 o'clock for the evening program. Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Radha Manan Mohan ki jai, Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Vancha Kalpadruscha Kripa Sindhaveva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo.